Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 123. If I would have followed all the rules, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. Marilyn Monroe.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by VideoBlocks. Now, VideoBlocks is a subscription-based stock media company that gives you unlimited access to premium stock footage everyone could afford. If you're looking for like extra exterior shots or things that you might want to incorporate into any of your projects, whether that be a narrative, documentary, music videos, commercials, these guys got you covered. They've got unlimited daily downloads from a library of over 115,000 HD video clips, as well as a huge selection of After Effects templates for like opening credits, motion graphics titles, company logos, as well as motion backgrounds as well. It's pretty amazing. And on average, subscribers pay less than $1 per download in a course of a year. And the content does not get stale. They're constantly adding new content to the library every month. So it keeps it very, very fresh, and you always have something new to look forward to. And everything you download is 100% royalty free. Even if your subscription is canceled, you have unrestricted usage rights for anything you want to do, including personal projects and commercial projects. And you keep whatever you download and maintain the usage rights forever. Now, VideoBlocks is offering The Tribe a yearly subscription for $99. That's $50 off the usual price tag, just for you guys, just for The Tribe. That's less than $10 a month. So to get this deal, just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. That's VideoBlocks, VIDEO blocks.com/hustle for this exclusive offer. And the show is also sponsored by Hollywood Camera Work. Now, guys, if you are interested in learning how to block or how to do any kind of staging or direction on how to move the camera, Hollywood Camera Work has the most insane course ever created for that. And they're kind of legendary. They've taught at ILM, Pixar, Disney, Warner Brothers, all the major studios, all the major television networks. They're crazy, and it's really, really amazing. And they also just came out with seriously, and I've taken this course, the directing actors or how to direct actors course. It is the most insane thing you have ever seen in your life. It goes through every aspect of how to direct actors, every form of getting a performance out of an actor, also how to do casting, how to set up rehearsals, the whole ball of wax. And they also have a course on visual effects for directors. They have an awesome course called Hot Moves, The Science of Awesome. If you want to get really amazing, action-packed, kind of like Tony Scott or Michael Bay kind of moves, but those kind of like crazy moves that make your movies look much more cinematic and much more awesome. Now, I have a special deal with Hollywood Camera Work. You can get 30% off all courses, all apps, everything they have to offer by using the code HUSTLE. So go to indiefilmhustle.com/Hollywood Camera. That's indiefilmhustle.com/Hollywood Camera and use the coupon code HUSTLE to take advantage of this insane offer. So guys, today on the show, we're going to talk about the next great big thing that's going to take over the industry. Virtual reality. That's what everyone keeps saying. And you know what? It very might well be the next wave. I don't know if it's ever going to take over what we consider traditional storytelling, because I think there is a segment of the population that wants to be told a story and not experience a story. But I don't know. There are better men than me out there talking about this, and much more intelligent guys than me out there talking about this. So I wanted to kind of dive into it today. And I got on the show Jason Diamond from SuperSphere VR. You know, him and his brother Josh, they build VR rigs and have worked with a ton of Fortune 500 companies, as well as independent films and so many other different clients New York Fashion Week, Minnesota Twins, and a lot of big VR gigs. And they are getting known in the industry as the VR guys. So they understand the technology, they understand what they're doing with it, and what can be done with it. So we talk a lot in this interview about cinematic VR. Because there's VR for video games and kind of like experiences, but how does this apply to storytellers? How does this apply to us as filmmakers and as storytellers to tell our stories? It's just another tool like anything else. And that's what I was curious about. And I really, kind of dug in with Jason and really figured out, is this something that I'll be able to use in the future? Justin Lin, the director of the Fast and Furious, some Fast and Furious movies and Star Trek Beyond, he just directed a little VR movie called Help, which is honestly, I have to say, pretty freaking awesome for Google. And it was like very interesting. It was a very interesting viewing experience. I didn't watch it in VR, I watched it on YouTube, but you can kind of tell that it's this immersive storytelling tool. It's really interesting, and I'm really curious to see where it goes in the future. The cost of getting into VR has come down dramatically. So now it's affordable for filmmakers. I use that term very loosely, but considering it used to cost, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get full rigs set up and, all that kind of stuff, now it's becoming much more accessible to the general population. So it should be really interesting to see where this all goes in the next coming years. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with Jason Diamond. I'd like to welcome to the show the one and only Jason Diamond. How you doing,
What's
sir?
up, man?
How you doing?
Good.
So you're here to educate the Indie Film Hustle tribe, and myself on this new technology I keep hearing about so much called virtual reality. And I'm going to be honest with you, the last time I actually really even paid any thought to virtual reality is when I saw it in The Lawnmower Man.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because I think you and I are both from the same vintage. So
I like that term, from the same vintage. That's good.
Thank you. I remember how horrible it was back in the 80s in that movie. It was like 89. And I went into like a video game, like an arcade, and they had a virtual reality thing, and I went in there, and it was just so horribly clunky, and I was like, "Wow, this is." But
back
I know
then, you mean?
back then.
Yeah.
So that's the last time I really even thought about virtual reality. But I've been hearing about it as a buzzword for the last few years, and all these new cameras and things coming out. So please explain virtual reality in its current form to me, like as if I was a child.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I think back then the issue, conceptually, things like that have been around forever. I mean, look at William Gibson's Neuromancer, like all that stuff. The cyberpunk stuff was essentially a VR type description. And I think it's been proven that people like Arthur C. Clarke and other, sci-fi writers typically will predate actual scientific discoveries with fantasy scientific sci-fi discoveries, because they're not bound by the laws of science or math or whatever, and somehow they always come up with the same stuff. But I mean, I don't know what the actual definition of virtual reality is, other than to simulate reality. In its current form, I think there's actually multiple bullet points, Roman numerals, tiers, or whatever you want to call it, as descriptors to that moniker. And then after that comes AR and XR, mixed reality stuff, which I think Apple will probably go for straight out of the gate. But I think virtual reality you could define as multiple tiers of, we'll call 360 video, be it mono or stereo. Stereo preferable in a lot of cases to really add some depth and roundness to what you're looking at. That 360 video does not allow you to move freely through the space. You are an observer within a predefined bubble, for actual lack of anything other than literally a sphere you're standing inside of. And then you have the more 360 video can be immersive, depending on the content and what you consider the word immersive to really mean. If someone's engaged in the content, then they are immersed, for lack of a better term. And I'm sure everyone has their own thoughts on this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
there's been many movies that you are so immersed in that you're like completely
sure,
immersed
yeah,
into
of
the movie.
course. I mean, that's IMAX and other, widescreen is supposed to immerse you in wrapping you curved TVs,
Mhm.
anything to sort of blot out your sense of current reality to put you in a quote unquote virtual reality, whether
Mhm.
that's a headset or even just a TV screen. Um, so, but you can move forward into the more what will currently, which will go away soon enough also, but we'll currently call tethered, headsets like Oculus or Vive, however you want to say it, or any number of, knockoffs or other people making similar products,
Mhm.
or even the Gear VR is probably the best known mobile version of 360 video or apps. But for like a full room scale interactive, which you would call, I guess, the ability to move around a space, have your body physically move your field of view inside an action would be more Unity based, uh, installations, but experiences
Mhm.
using game engines to do rendering, things that video games have been doing for 10 years or more. The VFX industry has been working in spherical video for years,
Mhm.
right? So bringing that type of technology to a instead of using it for reflection maps or global illumination, or first person shooters, you're changing the controller of your view from your hands to your head.
Right now, yeah, because we've all played video games that you're completely immersed in the world, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically what most of those first-person shooters and those kind of adventure games and things like that, Warcraft and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's all generated in a computer. So what's cool now is that you're doing it all live with like an actual camera or multiple cameras. Now, I have seen I've seen your setup on one of your behind the scenes that you did with the Minnesota Twins that had
Mm-hmm.
the 4 cameras that were all kind of like a very wide angle lens, so it kind of gets the entire
Yep.
spectrum. I was over at Cinegear this year over here in LA, and I tested out these little balls that had I don't know, probably like 10 or 15 cameras. GoPro had something similar that like has this little sphere that just kind of records the whole world around it. What is
Yeah.
that? Is that similar to what you guys were doing, or is it just different?
Well, there's two types of acquisition cameras,
Mm-hmm.
we'll call them. You have I don't even know what non-integrated and integrated,
Okay.
right? We'll call it that. A integrated camera is like the Jaunt or the Ozo, where you have a camera that is purpose made for VR. It is a single housing that has multiple lenses. It's not multiple cameras, it's multiple lenses, and whether or not those lenses are actually camera modules or whatever
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. They are all purpose built to talk to each other, be
Mm-hmm.
gen locked,
Mm-hmm.
to have global shutter if possible, and work together as a functioning one button one setting type thing. Even if you can manipulate each lens separately, you are working in an ecosystem that is built to do that, right?
Right.
That is an integrated camera. A non-integrated camera I'm not making a judgmental line between these, it's purely descriptor,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
the non-integrated camera is what most of us or most of the community is forced to use at this time, which is to take existing cameras and put them together to create, a multi-viewpoint 360 camera to create the sphere and the equirectangular and whatever else you're shooting, panoramas, if that's what you do. And so, size, to dovetail into your Minnesota Twins
Mm-hmm.
comment,
Mm-hmm.
and a Blackmagic rig, is when, GoPro was the first company that people made non-integrated rigs with, because the camera is tiny,
Right.
and you want to get the sensor planes as close to each other as possible and the nodal point on the lens and all that stuff to reduce parallax, so that you are covered in as many cameras as possible. When you cross a stitch, when you get closer to the camera, you want to be able to still be seen by multiple lenses. Closeness to the camera is a hotly debated point about a lot of, if someone sees a rig, the first thing they'll say is, how close can you cross the stitch line?
Mm-hmm.
And
Can you explain the stitch line, because I know that might be
so the
confusing.
stitch line, so let's take the 4-camera Blackmagic rig, right? So you just can think of it in your head as a north, south, east, west, as a plus sign,
Mm-hmm.
right? So coming out of the plus sign, let's imagine a V, off the tip of each plus, and that's the field of view of the sensor, of the lens, right? In our case, and in most VR camera cases, you're using a fisheye, so let's use 180 degrees as the field of view. So you have a flat line. In our case, we're using fisheye lenses, and in most camera cases, you're using fisheye lenses. So we can consider the field of view 180 for this example. So coming off of each plus, you have a straight line across, right? Those lines will converge in the 45-degree diagonals of each of the plus, right? So the areas where the lenses don't specifically see, the edges of the fields of view overlap. That's the parallax point. So based on how close you are to the field of view overlap, you will not be seen by enough of both of the lenses, in which case you can't use that footage because you can't hand off any content from one lens to the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. So given that, that's when people say, well, to back up slightly. So the better overlap that you have, the closer someone can come to the camera potentially, although with in a VR sense, because it is virtual reality, if someone stood 2 feet from you, it probably wouldn't be very comfortable. And you probably wouldn't want that to be, outside of a specific narrative need to do that. So in most scenarios, people aren't going to come 2 to 3 feet from the camera. But that is, again, I'm sure there's tons of people listening to this who know about VR who are like, that's bullshit, whatever. But that's, it's, I'm just speaking on a larger general scale here. Anything is possible if it works for the narrative or your experience, right? So if you want to throw your horizon off and make people nauseous because you're doing it on purpose to make someone feel something, sure, do it. But know what you're doing to your audience, instead of just making crappy VR. And again, those are two separate things. But
now, so a lot of people, aren't going to be able to go and see like the pyramids or the Great Wall of China, for example, and they don't have the resources to even get there or the time. Will VR be something that will give them the opportunity to kind of experience being at those places?
Absolutely. And, again, depending on the level of the experience, you could do a guided tour through Giza, you could do Petra or whatever, you could easily make someone feel like they're there and feel the scale of the place that they're shooting or the experiences. I read an article over the weekend about a nursing home where a company has been bringing in exactly what you're saying. Like these elderly people will no longer be able to travel to Italy or France or Egypt or Bangkok or wherever to see the things they want to see. And virtual reality in a 360 stereo video case allows them to experience that location from their bed. Which I think is a wonderful thing. You can think of it on multiple levels, even looking for like PTSD or getting over a fear of heights or a fear of spiders or cats or clowns. Sorry,
no worries.
My brother just closed the door. A fear of cats or clowns or whatever.
Yeah, I read something about that, like about arachnophobia, like having a fear of spiders. It could help with that.
Right. Immersion therapy has been around for a long time, but it's you having to actually do that thing. Hey, you're afraid of heights. Let's go to the Empire State Building and go to the observation deck. Like, well, sure, that may be the ultimate and the best way to do it, but what if you live in a town that only has 2-story buildings? What if you can't get anywhere to do that? And honestly, it's expensive. And what if you also have a fear of crowds? So, so I think there is actually an endless array of options of how VR can impact people even beyond entertainment. I think the entertainment industry for VR is actually very small.
Yeah, I was going to actually say something. Steven Spielberg came out and said that he thinks, and I'm going to quote him, "I think we're moving into a dangerous medium with virtual reality. The only reason I say that is that it's dangerous is because it gives the viewer a lot of latitude and not take the direction of the storytellers, but they make their own choices of where to look. How do you tell a VR story as a filmmaker when you want audiences to access everything, when the audience has everything like to access at once? How do you tell a story in VR?"
Guess what? I read that quote when he said it at Cannes,
Mhm.
and I couldn't believe that he said it for two reasons. One, that he is the advisor to Robert Stromberg's company called the VR Company. So it would seem kind of disingenuous to the company you're advising to say that VR is a dangerous medium for storytellers. But two, it's not very forward thinking for someone who has created, I think, one of the strongest visual languages for cinema for what he does in our lifetime.
He created the
right?
blockbuster.
Yeah, but not even that. Like, there are Spielberg shots, just like there
Oh,
are
God, yeah.
Hitchcock shots or whatever.
Yeah.
And so someone who created his own signature legacy language for cinema, to say that he's afraid of something trumping that seems narrow-minded.
Mhm.
And I'd love to have this conversation with him in person if anyone can make that happen. But
You and me both, brother.
let's take VR aside out of that comment, and let's say, you know what? I went to the movies with my kid over the weekend to see a movie in the theater, in the comfy seats, laying back, reclined,
Sure.
and if someone's bored, you know how I know that? They're looking at their phone in the theater.
Yeah,
right?
sucks.
They have just as much of an opportunity to disengage from the screen without having goggles on as if they had goggles on.
Mhm.
Good storytelling, be it narrative, nonfiction, documentary, whatever it is, if it's not engaging, it doesn't matter what freedoms, in my opinion, what freedoms the viewer has. If they're not engaged, it doesn't matter. Tons of studies have shown that when people put on goggles, heat maps, tons of heat map data has proven this. They look left once, right once, up, down, back. They kind of explore their space, and then they literally look forward. So, so if a story cannot engage them to look where they should be looking, at least this is first viewing stuff, right? Of course, when I watched Miller's Crossing for the millionth time over the weekend because John Polito died. And
I know.
Rewatch that. And I'm looking at things that listening to words that I wanted to pick up on, focusing, just like you can listen to a song you love a million times and just listen to the drums or just listen to the bass or whatever. So there's multiple viewings you can't take into account. But on the first viewing, it is your opportunity to give the viewer the experience that you want them to have. At least, you know what I mean, right out of the gate. And I think that good, solid storytelling, again, not using that in a strictly narrative sense, we'll just use it as an overall, a story is a story, is what you need. Is what you need, and that language has not been defined yet. So I'm not saying that that's easy, and it's not like the only way to learn it or to develop your own is to do it and make mistakes. Not everything you're going to do is going to work.
Right, because you're basically at the infancy of this medium.
Yeah, I mean, and to his point, to Spielberg's point, yes, because the viewer has freedom to disengage, yet stay inside the world, right? Because in the theater you could disengage, but you're breaking the wall and you're on your phone and you're not in the world anymore. But if you disengage with the main plot line in VR, you have the ability to look out the window,
explore, right?
Hold on. You have the ability to look out the window, explore, look around the world you're in, which I don't think is a bad thing because, when we do narrative things, I like to try to build in secondary and maybe even tertiary plot lines that if the viewer decided to not follow the main storyline would still get, the person they're talking to in the conversation gets up and walks away at a certain point, right? So then, okay, well, I can't look in that direction anymore. I can, but now there's boring. That person left. Maybe I'll re-engage with the person in front of me who is, delivering the lines or whatever it is. I mean, it's a basic example, but,
No, I get you. I know, I get you completely. And there's one movie, well, there's a couple that come to mind, but one specifically that I would have loved to had a VR experience with was Avatar, because that
Sure.
world is so beautiful. Like you just want to live there. Like you just want to walk around and see what
Right.
James
See, that
Cameron
would
came
be
up
a
with.
that would be a room scale VR thing, I would imagine,
Mhm.
experience, because the world is, if you could walk around and walk up to the characters while they're having their conversations and stand there with them and be a part of a battle or whatever. It's not a game per se, although it could be, but I think the ability to be there and move around in that case would be the best implementation of that. And moving down the road in what they call the 6 degrees of freedom is what everybody's moving towards, which is being able to, even in a 360 degree, and that's mainly in video, right?
Mhm.
In video games, you have that because you can move around and look around stuff. If you move your body, parallax changes. If anyone listening or you have never put on the HTC Vive or Vive, I'll say that every time I say it both ways. I don't know why. And do Google's Tilt Brush. That is the most mind-blowing app ever.
Mhm.
And it's so simple. Oh, I can draw a circle and then I can walk around it and
That's pretty badass.
and draw around it and draw through it and draw volumetrically and draw with clouds and all sorts of stuff. That's the ultimate, VR experience. We can't do that with video. Eventually we will be with light field and other LiDAR and other types of technology that gives us depth map information and allows us to create occlusion and parallax and things in video captured environments.
So basically, we're all heading towards the holodeck.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean,
That's
the
what we wanna
holodeck
be.
is XR for lack, because there's no headset,
Yep.
right?
You just walk into
And
the environment.
you're walking into an environment. It's like Hunger Games
Mhm.
or those kind of things where you are, or Westworld. I think the trailer for Westworld shows that they're simulating, or at least showing that they have control over an environment from far away.
Mhm.
But yes, the holodeck is the overall,
Goal.
I think, goal for certain things. I guess everyone could have a holodeck in their house. Depends what the technology is, but the Void, I think, I don't know if you know about that, it's in Utah currently, is similar to that in that you have a tethered experience, because I think they put something on your back that holds the all you need for the goggles and everything,
Mhm.
and you walk around in a black warehouse, right?
Right.
But in the goggles, you're seeing and working things out, and you pick stuff up, and I think they have real things that you grab in certain areas. There's like a tube, but it could be, I might be speculating about some of this, but someone was describing it to me, and I hadn't been there. But that is the current experience of that, and it's supposed to be incredible.
Now, did you get the chance to see Justin Lin's VR short film Help?
Yeah.
What did you think?
No,
What did you think of that?
I thought it was amazing. I mean, that's the Mill. The Mill does incredible work.
Mhm.
That is a great mix of CG and video.
Mhm.
But it's done at a very high level and it's very expensive.
Oh God,
There's not
yeah.
a lot of people that can do that.
Yeah, the indie world is not doing VR anytime soon.
Well, they are, but not you wouldn't be able to unless your friend's company that is helping you, like in traditional media, your friend's company would be, a small production company that owned a Red or something would lend it to you to make your indie film. If you had a friend who's a small production company that had a Unity developer and CG, VFX guys, then sure, you could pull that off. But yeah, in a normally budgeted environment, it would be very hard to do something at that level. But that doesn't matter. I mean, we're working at a certain level, and some jobs are bigger than others, and you work to give each job its due. Like you would in anything else, and
Right.
try to figure out how to offer the most. Because at the same time, we're trying to push the medium forward, as is everyone else who's currently creating VR. I would hope that every job is done to try to make the medium as much poorly worded, but as better than you currently left it.
So basically, VR is just it's a new platform. It's a new tool like anything else. It's like when certain technological advances came into play, like shooting 3D or color or sound. It's just another.
Absolutely.
It's just another thing. It's a pretty big leap. From where we are, and then how to include that. But let me ask you, how do you think it's going to affect the film and television industries in the future? Like, do you foresee it ever overtaking narrative film as we know it today, or narrative storytelling today?
No, because they don't overlap.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah.
I don't think you can tell the same. Like, you can't make
The Godfather,
the Godfather, or
Right.
The Master, or whatever. In VR. The script could be the same, but the execution would be different enough that I don't think they would overlap. I mean, I could be completely wrong, and I'm sure someone will comment or something that's saying I'm an idiot, but I just, the visual language is not set in stone, and I don't think it ever will be. The BBC put out something saying that they want to create a VR guideline, a book, best practices or whatever. And sure, best practices are huge, definitely key, certainly for pipeline management, data management, on-set, workflows and things like that. From a visual storytelling standpoint, I think there can be guidelines, but again, we've done content where a client wants a shot that technically you would say to them that doesn't work. You can't do that in VR, right? But we do it, and obviously, of course, you want to give alternatives. So you say, well, let's do your shot. If we don't think it's going to work, then we'll do it the other way. Obviously, you want to have options. Hold on. But guess what? The shot they wanted totally worked, and it was awesome. And
Right.
it's a golf piece, and they wanted the camera on the ground. And this was a 5 Red Dragon rig.
Wow.
And so we have the camera like a foot and a half from the ground, with the cup like basically what would be maybe a foot in front of your feet. And Paul Azinger, who's 1993 PGA champion, putting at you. This is just the last shot. There's a whole piece with him, but he's putting at you and drops it right in the cup. But when he walks up to you, you feel like he's like 10 feet tall, but it doesn't matter, because at that moment, contextually in the shot, it makes total sense. If you did that somewhere else, it wouldn't work.
Right.
So, and we may never be able to do that shot again.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there are visual language, what you will call it visual language, cues, ideas, shots that may be context specific to a movie, and you will never do again.
No.
There will be other things that I think you will use over and over again.
Right. It just depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell, and what type of experience you're doing, whether it's an immersive experience like walking through the Pyramid of Giza, or doing a golf shot,
Or you know what? Doesn't always have to be immersive. Maybe it's just a training video that a new plumber needs to learn how to, put in a piece, and he can sit in his house and watch a training video that shows him how to take the piece apart and do it. And if you went even a step further and you had the 2 hand controllers from a Vive, you could, actually manipulate the part and do the operation. Like that kind of stuff is personally, I think, going to be way more impactful than Spielberg's VR movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
To the world, to the overall, the technology helping people and helping mankind move forward. Movies do that because they create regular movies. They create, the ability to empathize with people, hate people, like people, love people, or experiences. And I think you could do the same with VR. But I think manufacturing and workplace safety and, like we said earlier, PTSD and other things like that, I think will have a larger lasting impact on the world than movies.
Right. And I think that, if we're going to go into the holodeck example, that the holodeck is what we're all kind of going for. And I'm trying to think about watching a movie in the holodeck. It's a completely different experience of like watching The Godfather, let's say, in a holodeck. Like you're there with Michael Corleone.
You would be in the movie.
You would be in the movie.
Watch goes away.
Right. You're in the movie. You're hanging out. You're hanging out with the guys. You're sitting on the couch watching this thing go down, which is a completely different experience than
Right.
the way Coppola directed you to watch the film. So
Exactly.
I think that, and this is just my personal experience from what we've discussed so far, I think that VR has a much larger capacity to help, like you said, help humanity in many other ways other than storytelling and other than, competing with a movie or a television show. I think there will be those aspects of things in the future. But even if today we had the holodeck, we had the technology of the holodeck, like, you and I can walk in and I'll, walk into The Godfather, walk into Jaws, on the boat, and like, it would be fun, but I don't know if I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be as impactful as like what you just said with a surgery training or walking the Great Wall or that kind of stuff. And a million other kind of things that can be done with it. I just don't think it's going to have the impact.
Well, I think to backtrack a little bit and be slightly contradictory to myself, I think movies and entertainment has a huge place in VR.
Of course.
I just think that maybe they won't be called movies. Maybe they'll be called experiences. Maybe they'll be called something else.
Right.
It's not, I think I got into a debate with a couple of people on Twitter about the term cinematic VR.
Right.
People take these words like cinema and apply them to what they see in their head.
Mm-hmm.
They want 24 frames per second and that look to translate to VR. And currently it cannot. Mm-hmm. Because you actually want more frame rate at a certain point, at least in the goggles. On a computer, maybe not if you're just clicking and dragging. Mm-hmm. But on the headset, your eyes move fast. Your brain refreshes very fast. And you need higher frame rate to really, when you turn your head, not feel like you're drunk or there's a stagger of frames, with motion blur and other things. You need to feel like you're there. Like, I don't know about you, but like I have a thing where I feel like I notice frame rate changes in the real world. Like if I'm feeling a specific way or I'm feeling like sort of groggy or whatever, that maybe I'm seeing in a perceived higher frame rate played back at 24, right? Yeah, right. But people say when they're in a hyper alert state, when they're in a really busy and whatever, and the day flies by, that maybe you felt like you were at 18 frames a second. Like your body will, sometimes it's really bright outside. Obviously your pupils narrow and other things happen, simulates camera irises and things that you feel a sharp shutter kind of vibe, right? Mm-hmm. You feel these things and you want these things to move into VR. I don't think we have the cameras to do that yet with,
but they're getting there.
They're getting there. I think they're going to be larger structural changes. It's not a deficit to the current cameras available. I think that there is technology that needs to come into play to manipulate time and space to function differently in a spherical environment than it does on a flat plane sensor being forced to curve with a fisheye lens. You know what I mean? I think, and we're forcing it, right? And that's fine. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it is what it is. And going back to the Blackmagic cameras, to make a rig that because we come from a traditional cinema world and we have reds, we got one of the red heliums, 8K Super 35. I mean, we appreciate resolution and dynamic range and depth of field and all those things. Mm-hmm. And in VR, those things haven't been fully explored yet to see if they really work on a larger scale. And we do make rigs out of the red sensors and the red cameras. And based on what I was saying before, there are parallax things with that because the cameras are of a physical size, and unless we can take them apart and make a new thing, then they can only be so close, right? Physical limitations. So moving from the GoPro, like I said, to go all the way back to what we could consider one big digression, the GoPro, was what people were using to start to make homebrew rigs because they were small and are small and
affordable.
And affordable and inherently have a wide field of view, right? So, GoPros are small, affordable. They inherently have a wide field of view, and they can be very close. So you can do rigs that have smaller parallax and other things because they are close together. But they don't have Genlock. They don't have this. They don't have that. Now they do, but we're talking, a few years ago. When everyone was starting. So everyone's looking for tiny camera, wanting better sensors, better lens options, better, what can we do? So then, last year Blackmagic came out with, or maybe a little longer ago, with the micro line, micro cinema, micro studio. And all of a sudden you have a very tiny form factor that has SDI, has Genlock, has their DB15 sub, D sub connector that they provide the pinouts for, so you can make your own cables and do other things. You have this somewhat open platform with a reasonable sensor, Super 16 size sensor with good dynamic range that, if you use the cinema camera, records ProRes internally at 60 frames at 1080, or you can have a nice 10-bit video SDI out of the micro studio and record into anything you want. In our case, we record into the Apollos, the Convergent Design Apollos, because we want to have as few recorders as possible on the rig. And the rig we're using is Alex Clive's Mini i4, and we've known Alex for a long time, and we worked together on a 9-camera rig, 9 Blackmagic camera rig that we used on a Chromat Red Bull Fashion Week piece last September. But that's not as mobile as a 4-camera rig, and traveling to Minnesota to do this Minnesota Twins piece, we need to be able to pick it up and be on the field and running and moving. And a 4-camera rig is easier for that. The 9-camera rig would give us a better resolution because we had more overlap and could make a bigger stitch, like a 9K stitch. Excuse me. We get a 6K stitch out of the 4K Blackmagics, but we have to operate at 30 frames a second because those cameras top out at 30 frames at 4K.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think the VR experience is going to be in the future? Like, if as far as projection is concerned, how people will experience it, like huge domes.
I mean, domes. We did a dome piece this year for the Panorama Music Festival with a company called the Invisible Light Network. That was shot on Reds, and they mixed it in a After Effects environment, and we shot these dancers in a black room, wearing black with different illumination things, lights coming from under the camera and whatever, and then Invisible Light Network took it all and put it together, and that was in a 180 70-foot inflatable dome. And I think I wasn't able to go see it when they had it finally finished, but I think domes are incredible because you can experience something on a mass scale without goggles. You can still get high resolution. You can still get ambisonic audio in the way that it's not ambisonic in the same way it is with headphones, but you're still feeling the audio from directional, theatrical style audio where it's all around you. And it's amazing. It is a different type of experience. Right. You know what I mean? Much like watching a movie on your phone is different than watching it on a 70-foot screen. Of course. You know what I mean? They feel different. They both have their positives and negatives. And, I think that there will be multiple technologies in the future that will, I wouldn't say ubiquitize, but will sort of start to carve out sort of certain exhibitional models, like domes, like the Void, like, really high quality, let's say maybe even IMAX goggles or something that have, 2 screens, one per eye. Or there's a company that we really like called Avagant. They make these Glyph headphone. They look like Beats headphones, but they have, retinal projection lenses in the band, and you flip it down and you look like LeVar Burton from Next Generation, but you're doing retinal projection and you're not looking at a screen. And I think over time, that type of technology to take us away from screens and these big bulky things will make the experiences even easier to do and even more immersive.
Now, what I have this is a question I've been dying to ask anybody doing VR. How the hell do you hide your crew in a 360-degree view?
Well, depending on what you're doing, the crew can actually be in the shot.
Mm-hmm.
But
Let's say if you're doing,
but they can't act like crew.
right?
So if you're in a public environment, they can just walk around.
Right.
Right. I just did a shoot for a company on the street. We were shooting, just literally put the camera down on the median, and we're recording, 10, 15 minutes of action that with, around the street. And I was just standing on the street corner, on the opposite corner, just like on my phone, waiting for in this case, for the director to call cut.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody knows that I'm working on the crew. I just look like a guy on the street on my phone.
So
right?
then,
but
mm-hmm.
in the case of the golf course shoot, obviously we can't be on the golf course.
Right.
So we had to hide behind trees. We had to build for the red camera, we operate it wirelessly from a small DIT cart. So with full control and some other things. And so we had to build a DIT cart on a hand truck. So it was really narrow, and we could move it fast on a golf cart or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you just find the biggest tree, and everyone stands in a line, behind the tree and looks at the monitor. And if you can't see the camera, it can't see you. Just like normally in this case, it's always looking in all directions.
Right.
So sometimes it's challenging. You know what I mean? You have to, on a scout, you have to look for where people are going to hide. Like we need staging and green room for talent or staging for gear, but we also need crew staging per shot sometimes. You know what I mean? So it's a challenge. It's fun though to
it sounds
everybody
like
run and hide,
It's like we're kids again.
Yeah.
Now, how do you light a VR scene? Like with lights and stuff like that for more of a cinematic situation?
Well, you have multiple options. So you can, if you don't want to do any painting or comping, then you can use obviously Fincher style, just, high wattage practicals. You can hide lights. We had to do a thing for David Chang with Momofuku up in Toronto. And we put, small LED and fluorescent bulbs up under the aluminum, cooking hoods and stuff to use the aluminum as a bounce, but also to hide lights the camera couldn't see behind the counter, using occlusion to our advantage. But if you wanted to paint out, and in one shot for this, we needed a light to hit the guy. So we put a light up on a internal balcony, kind of second half floor thing, hit the talent with the light. When the shot was over, obviously you have to make sure no one's crossing into that, we'll call it a quadrant for lack of a better description right now. If no one's crossing across there, then it doesn't matter when you wrap that shot, you take a clean plate of the room or even of just that area, and then you sub that camera, that lens, that whatever for that take in, and then it's gone. It's not even a paint out. You're just subbing a take into a quadrant and stitching it in, right? So you could do that, or you can literally put something in and do traditional paint and roto and paint it out.
Sure,
if you don't have the ability to do whatever. I mean, so it really comes down to budget, desire, ability, and need.
Got it. Now, the other big question is post-production workflow.
Right.
How do you cut this? How do you process all of this data? What's the normal workflow on like the Twins situation?
So on the Twins thing, we came back. We have our ProRes, 4 ProRes files. We synced them up. In this case, we used AVP, and we sung them up and did a daily stitch. So where we're just doing rough blends, making sure everything's aligned, horizon straight, and any audio we have is sunk in, and we have a traditional dailies workflow, right? So it's not that the visual quality is less per se, but we are not focusing on really fine stitches. We just need to be able to watch it in a 360 environment while we cut. We do that in Premiere. Premiere is consistently getting better with the tools that they are adding in for VR, and they just announced, I think today, their IBC sort of sneak preview that they're adding in like actual VR aware options in Premiere, where it's something it knows that content is equal rectangular or what have you, so it automatically puts you in the environment, and they've added the metadata in media encoder. So when you export, it automatically has the VR metadata tags. So you can export and not have to inject the metadata like you have to do for YouTube and other things like that. So it's moving forward but we cut in Premiere because Premiere has resolution independence and other things. There's other people do cut in Final Cut 10 because it has the similar resolution independence.
How about Resolve? Do you ever use Resolve?
We haven't yet, and we were working with Blackmagic, to try and get some VR stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think Fusion. I have some friends that use Fusion to stitch and do things like that, and we're looking into that as well. Nuke is obviously not cost effective for most people, but their Kara VR stitcher is probably the best one at this point. But anyway, we create our dailies. We use stuff like Tim Dashwood's 360 toolbox to do any image manipulation in terms of rotating the sphere, offsetting, doing any image manipulations or things, transforms we need to do to the equirectangular. There's things like Mocha VR where we can do any painting or that kind of stuff. There's hold on. When's this coming out? I'm trying to think. Sorry. Mocha VR is in beta right now. And so I don't know if that's an NDA thing, but I'll say something else. And then you have Mocha, which you can use to do paint outs and other things like that, and tracking and all sorts of pseudo visual effects things to remove and add things. And then we when we're finished, we go back to our original media and we do our fine stitching for just the media we're using, just the shots we're using.
And where do you color grade, or do you color grade?
And then we grade in either Resolve or Scratch.
Gotcha.
For stereo, Scratch currently has the best grading environment for VR. They spent a lot of time working on it. It's not even that expensive anymore. Resolve is also the default. We grade all of our stuff is graded in Resolve, traditional media wise. And again, like I said, if it's mono VR, then we do that in Resolve as well.
Got it.
And then we publish it wherever we're doing, be it a custom app or YouTube or Facebook or whatever the client's needs are. But moving forward into the future, it's going to be cloud-based stitching. So you have companies like Jaunt. Excuse me. So you have companies like Jaunt that they have their integrated camera, and then they have their Jaunt cloud services, their pipeline. So you take their footage, you upload it after you shoot, you organize it in their media manager, you push it up to the cloud, and it's stitched for you in the cloud in mono and computational stereo. So
pretty cool.
And you have companies like Pixvana that are working towards the same, in a consumer-facing. Jaunt is pseudo-consumer-facing right now. And there will be more companies like that. Human beings do not need to align cameras and stitch them.
Right.
Computers are
perfect
slave armies to do that. What humans do need to do from a stitching standpoint is the artistry of comp, paint, and roto, which a computer can never really do. So, but the computers should take us to 95%. And as we all know, the final 5% is always the hardest. But I'd rather focus on that and let things happen in the cloud. We're only limited by our internet service, which is a shackle of the overlords, currently because other places in the world have, where is it, Norway or Denmark, it's in the Citizens Bill of Rights that you have minimally a gigabit available to you at reasonable prices.
That's amazing. Can you imagine?
Yeah. So, there are limiters that are beyond anyone's control that we all know will eventually go away. So I think being able to look past those and plan for the future and develop pipelines and workflows that allow us to do more creative work and less tedious manual work that's unnecessary for humans to do, I think is the future. And one my brother and I are, and SuperSphere, our company is clearly focused on.
Can you talk a little bit about SuperSphere VR?
Yeah. So SuperSphere is my brother and myself, Lucas Wilson, Doug Allenstein, and H.M. Wollman. We're full service company from IP and technology to production and creative. So we kind of consider ourselves like a creative labs company, because we can. My brother and I operate our traditional production company, the Hidden Fortress, the same way. We are both a full service and an a la carte company. So if someone comes to us and just wants us to shoot something and hand it off, great. If someone wants us to do something from concept to completion, awesome. Like, what do you need to do? Let's talk about the best way to do it, no matter what part we're handling, and to make sure that everything is seamless, because we're going to hand off to you the same way we would hand off to ourselves. So we're not going to cut corners for you, because we don't cut corners for ourselves. So we like to, do things the right way, but we also push boundaries and try to do new things on every job that we can learn on and push into the next job.
Perfect. Now, one last thing. You guys talked about the Blackmagic camera. Can you talk about, because I know you guys are big fans of the Blackmagic cinema camera. Can you talk a little bit about why you like it on a technical standpoint? Because I know a lot of people kind of poo-poo on the camera because it's not a Red and it's not an Alexa. And trust me, I've shot with all of them. But I've just shot my first feature, as everybody who's listening to this podcast knows, on the Blackmagic Cinema 2.5, and I'm a huge fan of the camera because I've been a colorist for 10 years, so I know what the raw image can give me. What's your vibe on it, and tell us why you're such big fans of it?
Well, I think Blackmagic in general has done a great job, bringing affordable, and by affordable that doesn't mean low quality, affordable cameras to people to be able to do what they want to do and not worry about I don't have the money to rent an expensive camera, right? And because there's a lot of people who can make great content and make a living, right? So the consumer always wins in these scenarios because we just have choices, right? Choices are great for us. I think Blackmagic did a great job focusing on, in the original camera, the 2.5K sensor is a gorgeous sensor. I think the 4K sensor that came after it had some issues because they were fighting the global shutter thing, and that just eats dynamic range. And I think that was a learning experience for them, which was solved with the 4.6K sensor in both the big Ursa and the mini Ursa. I think also is I have not shot with it, but the images I've seen and the people I know who have them agree that it is the true successor to the 2.5K sensor. So is a
so right now you would not suggest shooting with the 4K? You would go right to the 4.6?
I would personally, because the 4K sensor needs a lot of light because of the global shutter is awesome. But you may not always need that. I haven't had a global shutter on my Reds forever, literally ever. And unless I'm really doing, whipping and there's stuff driving by fast and whatever, it's not noticeable. So I think smartly they went for the global shutter for the 4K camera because it is something people were requesting, and a lot of people were bitching about, oh, why can't we just have a global shutter sensor? And you say, well, here's why it's hard. Because you can have a global shutter sensor, but in this case, it eats dynamic range. And would you rather have a little more on the top end or low end, depending on how you're exposing, or do you want to kill rolling shutter? That's a side effect of DSLR. The DSLR revolution, for whatever you want to call it, is once everybody learned what rolling shutter was. Prior to the early 2000s and even 2006 or 7 when Red came out, no one really, the average public didn't know what a CMOS sensor was. They didn't know what read in and read out times were. They didn't know what that film has rolling shutter descriptively, because time is still time. It still takes time for light to hit something, a sensor, as it does. A film plane is global shutter, but the film is moving past. It's moving in a direction. So therefore, it's still a line by line type thing. Someone will say I'm wrong. I'm being very generalized here. If film is moving, it's still moving past and getting data at different times. A global shutter sensor is opening and closing like a phantom. That is getting a full exposure and close, as is the 4K Blackmagic sensor. This became a larger answer about Blackmagic, but I'm just saying. I think it's smart for them to try those things. I think the 4.6K sensor is the culmination of everything they learned on the 2.5K and the 4K sensor.
Now, have you used the Metabones adapter?
So we never used Metabones on the 2.5Ks. We use them on the Micro Studios with the Rokinons to get a wider field of view, because in traditional media I could back up, I could adjust my frame. In VR, I want the whole fisheye. And the only way to get that is to shrink the image down as much as possible. Now, of course, we're still using a 4x3 sensor would be great, but they don't make that. So because the fisheye is a circle. So currently we are losing information on the top and bottom of the fisheye. So you know being able to shrink the image down as much as possible gets us as much field of view, either top and bottom, or if you flip the camera on its side, you get field of view left to right. We use the Micro Studio and Cinema cameras in portrait mode because we would rather have to deal with overlap than have to put a camera up top.
Gotcha.
Because if they're in portrait mode, then you get the full width of the fisheye, and if you have a 180 or 185 degree lens, or even coming soon, companies are making 200 and 220 degree lenses. If they're in portrait, then they're going to touch at the top and the bottom, and I can paint out a tripod and I can have all my frames converge at the top. And then I just have to worry about vertical seams, which honestly I prefer to horizontal seams anyway.
Right. So just for everybody listening, the Metabones is this adapter you put on to the camera, which actually helps with the crop factor and also gives you another stop of light as well. Correct?
Well, it's a piece of glass that's shrinking the image. It's reducing the image in size. So it is taking the image circle, which would normally, let's say, cover half the sensor. It's squeezing that image circle down. Because it's squeezing it down, the pixels are doubling up on each other, giving you a perceived brightness in exposure. You're not getting another stop that would give you a true stop that would give you like more depth of field, say, or less depth of field rather. But you're getting a mathematical stop of brightness because you're doubling up pixels. You're cramming more information into a smaller zone. Like oversampling. It's like oversampling, for a lack of a better description. But and they're highly Metabones I think probably makes the best ones. They're expensive, but that piece of glass, if that's a cheap piece of glass, your image quality goes down real fast.
Got it. All depends also on the kind of glass you're using.
Well, of course, the front glass is the key always.
And now, would you use them with the Rokis?
Rokinons, I have here right in front of me 9 fisheye 2s, 8mm fisheye 2s. They're a little slow. 3.5 is a little slow.
Yeah.
But until someone makes like a 1.4,
sure,
EF or MFT mount, fisheye, I think we're stuck with it. But but also, the problem is you don't want shallow depth of field on a fisheye.
No,
for the most part. Right. And like I said, those might be narrative or other tricks you would use later for shots or things, but most of the time you need infinite depth of field.
So the last 2 questions I ask of all of my guests, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life in general?
Whoa.
I don't know. It's like an Oprah moment. I know. It's deep.
Let me go. I'm going to say something that you can insert back in the other thing about the Blackmagic cameras.
Okay.
So the reason we really like the Blackmagic Micro and Studio and Cinema cameras is you have a Super 16 sensor, albeit 16:9, giving you this high quality image in a super small form factor. It allows us to do things closer to the way we see them in our heads from a traditional standpoint with a traditional sensor and other things, dynamic range and what have you, but in a VR environment. So they're super helpful and they're not expensive, which is maybe the best point about them. I don't know, but
Okay.
okay. So to answer your question,
yes, to answer my question, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the business or in life?
There's a lot of them. I don't think this is something I learned by having not done it and gotten in trouble and had to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that collaboration and listening to other people is maybe the best thing to learn. And I think, luckily, being an identical twin, I was sort of foisted into that
Right.
by nature. Now I know plenty of people, plenty of brothers and sisters, and even twins who don't get along. In our case, based on our growing up and the things we went through and other things, we sort of were forced to rely on each other, and we did naturally have that collaborative nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard to listen to other people. I mean, my wife says to me all the time, "Are you listening to me? What I'm saying?" And
so listen is a good one.
Yeah. So I honestly, I think listening and being open to other people's ideas. That doesn't mean you have to take their idea. It doesn't mean you have to do what they say, but hearing other people's input is very key, because you can't know everything. Even if you think you do about something, you can't. John McLaughlin, one of the greatest guitar players ever, still practices hours every day because he does not know everything about the guitar that he wants to know.
Right.
And same thing for, when I was an editor on Avid years ago, you would meet someone who'd say, "Oh, do you do this way?" "No, I do it this way." "Oh, wow. You do it 2 keystrokes. I do it in 5.
Yep.
Great.
I know
Okay."
that
And
feeling.
that's on every application. But, I just think communication is a very big deal. And I think it's a
good
lesson. Yeah, it's a lesson to learn. Even if you think you already know it, just think about how you interact with people.
And then the last question is, what are your 3 of your favorite films of all time?
Oh, Jesus. I'm going to say this one because I said I just watched it over the weekend, Miller's Crossing, and I told my kid, who's 10, he asked me what I was watching, and I said, "This is one of my favorite films, Miller's Crossing." So I can't.
Okay.
I can't go against what I said to my child.
Of course. Good film. Very good film.
Yeah. No,
Can't go wrong with the Coens. Can't really go wrong.
No. I would say is totally cliche. It's totally ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna say Star Wars.
Of course.
It's a favorite, but it's a favorite because it's influential in my life and the entire entertainment industry, and none of us would be where we are without it.
Yes. It changed the game. It changed the game without a question.
Yes. So I'm going to say that. Third movie, I want to say something new.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something new that I really loved, because there's tons of old movies that I love.
So Batman versus Superman, obviously.
I didn't even see.
I'm joking.
You know what? I'm going to say The Witch.
Oh, wow. The Witch. Yeah, I heard that was really good.
That movie is awesome.
I heard
my friend described it as it's a heavy metal movie. Mm-hmm. It's like a slow, doomy heavy metal movie, but it's not. Like, it's like a song. It's like a really slow, doomy heavy metal song, and there's nobody famous in it, and it's not predicated on anything other than being an awesome movie.
Very good. Very cool. Now, where can people find you?
They can find us at our traditional production company, thediamondbros.com is our sort of repository for all the stuff we do as directors. SuperSphere VR.com is our VR company. Mm-hmm. We're on Facebook. Jason Diamond on Twitter. My brother's Josh_Diamond on Twitter. We're sort of all around, an all-seeing eye.
You are Hal.
Yes. Illuminati sci-fi. Yeah.
Well, man, listen, Jason, thank you so much for being. You've educated myself and the tribe on VR, which I was very ignorant before we start speaking. So I feel a little bit more comfortable with VR now. So thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it made some sense.
It did, man. Thanks. That was a really fun interview. I really like talking to Jason. And, VR, again, I don't know what the future lies for VR, because a lot of times when you hear that, when 3D was all the rage, when Avatar came back in, and that was going to change the industry and everything's going to be 3D, and it has its place, but it didn't change everything. Everything didn't just automatically go to 3D. It's just another storytelling tool. So I think VR will be the future. I think there will definitely be a place for it in cinema and in storytelling. I don't know how that works as a director, because as a director, you are directing. You're telling the audience where to look. You're telling a story visually. Where in the VR experience, you're just literally in the story. So imagine being in the room in The Godfather and not being told what to look at. It's just a different experience. You're not like, I'm not being told, look at Marlon Brando's lips right now as he says this, or like in Citizen Kane, you see Rosebud. If you were in a VR experience, that part would not be as impactful. So I'm really curious about seeing what can be done with the technology moving forward. I don't know if it'll ever replace, and I might famously be saying this, but I don't know if it'll ever replace traditional storytelling with edits and cuts and images like that, because you're being taken on a journey as a director and as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. You're telling the audience what you want to look at, where you want to look at what time, and the power of editing and what you can do with the power of editing. Whereas a VR experience is literally you're just walking around in that environment and experiencing that story firsthand, which is a completely different experience than traditional cinema. So I do have a feeling that it will have a place in the future. I don't think it's going to take over. I don't think it's going to be the thing that everybody watches, but who knows? In 30 or 40 years, that's might be where the audience wants to go, and they don't want to look at tradition. Look at animation. I mean, traditional animation is rare now, other than coming out of Japan. Disney pretty much after Princess and the Frog stopped doing traditional animation, and now they're only doing 3D animation. So, I don't know. The future is very interesting. I'm really going to be curious to see what happens with VR. But at least now, you and I are both a little bit more educated on VR and what it takes to make VR work, and we'll see what happens. So if any of you guys are doing any VR projects out there, please drop me a line. I love to hear about what you guys are doing. If it's specifically cinematic or storytelling, as opposed to, just an experience in VR, that doesn't interest me as much. But if you're doing something storytelling wise, or something along cinematic VR, I definitely would love to hear it and see what you guys in the tribe are doing. So don't forget to head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free filmmaking audiobook from Audible. And guys, if you haven't taken those master classes yet, you've got from Werner Herzog or Aaron Sorkin, for God's sakes, man, it's insane. These are great courses. They're like insane film schools within a 4 or 5 hour period. The things you learn from these master classes I learned a ton from the Aaron Sorkin, Werner Herzog. They have Hans Zimmer, the composer of The Dark Knight, coming out, so you really understand what they are doing. And then 2 insane acting classes by Kevin Spacey and Dustin Hoffman. And as directors, you really need to understand what and how to talk to actors. And these courses really help you do that. So head over to indiefilmhustle.com/masterclass to gain access to those classes. And as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.